Hello, my name is Caitlin Heflin, and this is my final project, PowerPoint. Identify the various types of investigative technology. So I found magnetic fingerprinting system, which is also known as AFIS, where you're able to identify and store and analyze fingerprints. High-speed ballistics photographing, which is a technique that uses high-speed cameras that allows investigators and experts to determine how bullet holes, gunshot wounds, and glass shatters are actually created. And DNA sequencing that uses DNA to identify criminals and victims by using trace evidence such as hair follicles and skin. The importance of police records in the investigative process efficiently and effectively. The different types of police reports that I found are things like stolen vehicle reports, death cases, traffic collisions, burglaries, and many more. When writing a report, the steps that you should take actually would be collecting information about the crime scene, the witnesses, taking complete notes, organizing the information, preparing the report, and proofreading and evaluating the report. The officers that should be actually listed too, which officers were at the crime scene, any injuries to any victims, and copies of the witness statements. The police reports are the backbones of the prosecution, which is true because when the police go up on the stand and testify that their reports are what they wrote themselves, the jury is actually going to be able to, believe them. Also, the reports should actually paint a picture, so the amount of detail that you should actually include in the police reports should be very strong, so that the judge doesn't have to, or the jury doesn't have to put any assumptions together, that it should be all written out for them. Explain necessity for the methods of marking and preserving evidence. So cross-contamination is a big thing. You don't want that, obviously. So preserving the crime scene is probably the first thing that you should do, and photograph the whole crime scene. If any evidence gets damaged while you're collecting or preserving, you at least have the backup of the evidence with the pictures. For how you should preserve the evidence, never put evidence in plastic bags. Condensation in a plastic bag can occur, and the moisture in the bag will actually ruin the evidence in the bag. So paper bags are the best way to preserve evidence because it allows the item to actually breathe inside the bag. Each piece of evidence should include an initial of the officer that's collected the evidence along with the date, and most other departments actually include you to put the case number, description of the evidence, where the evidence was located when it was discovered, initials of who discovered it, and any names of any witnesses that were around when it was discovered. It should be marked immediately after it is taken in, to actually, I guess, have it being any admissible into trial with the chain of custody, which is where I was going next. Any person that comes in contact with the piece of evidence needs to be logged in the chain of custody so that there is no part of it that can be admissible in court. Identify and explain the investigative techniques used in solving crimes. So finding a motive behind the crime is one, actually. Firearm identification. So this is where you can actually track back from a bullet. You can identify any guns, or if the gun wasn't there, it's a good way to help you figure out as a good start point. Documents that should be obtained. This is actually very helpful if you're trying to solve a crime. You can look into telephone records, bank statements, personal files, computers, building entrance and exit records, emails, voice recording. That will help you get a better idea of the person that was committing the crime. And surveillance and tracking is also a really helpful way to solve a crime. Discuss the necessity for importance of crime scene protection. So contamination of unwanted people. A quote that I found that was really helpful is, if you ask any crime scene technician, the biggest problem that they encounter on the job is they consistently hear the same response, that crime scene contamination by curious officers and detectives and supervisors. So the best way to help is to keep everyone out of the crime scene unless they have the exact reason to be there. Also, make sure that no one is eating, drinking, or smoking anywhere inside or near the crime scene. Also, a good thing to have is having only one exit and entrance in. So that's why a good way to preserve and protect the crime scene. Another thing is to make sure that it would be helpful to have a log that has everybody's name, their rank, and the reason that they were even there in the first place, what time they left, to help show in the trial everybody that had come in and out of the crime scene. Describe the steps of the preliminary investigation. So the preliminary investigation is known as the initial inquiry of officers by establishing facts and circumstances of suspected crime and preserve any evidence that is related to the crime. Documenting the crime scene includes taking photographs, sketches of the whole area, and any evidence that has been seen. Evidence that should be collected is firearms, weapons, blood, fingerprints, clothing, broken glass, fingerprints, anything like that. Be sure to locate and question any witnesses all the way down to their phone numbers, names, addresses, everything. And things that would be helpful also is to get their full statement and even call their information so that you can call them back at a further trial date. Identify and explain the general criminal laboratory techniques. Okay, so the different types of microscopes that I found were compound light microscopes, different comparison microscopes. Well, the most used one is the compound light microscope, and then the comparison one that is very important that you can use to like compare hair, you compare bullets, anything like that, because they show side by side to each other. The fuming that I found was it shows fingerprints on non-porous substances, which is like latent fingerprints that you can see that aren't visible to the eye. And then the UV I found that helps is it shows drugs in blood and urine, which is very helpful. The importance of evidence to court proceedings following arrest. Without evidence, no one would be convicted. And the 5 steps to court proceedings are the arraignment, the preliminary hearing, second arraignment, pretrial hearing of motions, and the jury trial. And then the Miranda rights. Any information that you gather from a witness that hasn't been read their Miranda rights cannot be used against them anytime in the court. This means that if you've interviewed anyone and they have vital information that they've told you before they were informed their constitutional rights, you actually can't present that to the jury. And these are the 5 techniques for proper interrogation: logical, sympathetic, indifferent, faith-saving, and egotistical, all of which are good ways to interrogate suspects, such as the logical is just a way to pretty much get them to cooperate. And then the one that I found, briefly, the egotistical is a very smart way to do it also, is because it actually pretty much is used to like get them to brag about their involvement in the actual case by saying like, oh, they would have been too smart to be able to do this crime. Well, it ends up getting them aggravated, and they actually spill additional information that to prove they were actually involved in the crime.